When doing a ritual of essence, it is combining both the spirit and the soul together. The spirit is this infinitely small point, and the soul is the infinitely large space that are brought together when doing the ritual of essence. And so the spirit is the element that is making the decision. It is the volition that is acting. It is the active part. And that active part is, insofar as we are talking about in a cosmological finite space, so in just regular space, we are in fact pulling the soul towards us. And when we call it the ritual of essence, between the spirit and the soul, it is the affirmation of one's own essence, which is inherently good. In that it is inherently good, it is therefore also, in the first step, in the present moment. So, to put it into function, when doing a ritual of essence, of affirming one's own self in the spiritual and the soulful sense, combining the two, it's not a projection into the future. There are projections into the future where, in order to make things happen, in order to manifest certain things, in order to move the directions of one's life and objects in one's life in a certain direction, but that's not the same thing. Here, talking about the essence of just simply being the self, and that is in the present moment. So it's not about becoming, it is about being. And that ritual is done in order to let the physical body receive the decision that one makes during the ritual. So when it's decided that you begin the ritual, then in the ritual it is an invocation of one's own greater soul, one's own greater self. And that invocation then is felt in the present moment, and during this ritual, which is kind of go into a trance-like experience where not everything that you feel at first is, of course, absolutely positive, but the purpose of it is to let the body be molded by this spirit that is invoking its greater self. And insofar as this is done well, meaning that you don't let the body interfere, the body has its sway on us because, well, in a way we are dependent on it, or at least we think we are dependent on it until we are able to become more in touch with our volitional self and our soulful self. So letting the body become molded by the soul, and in order to do that, the spirit, the self, the infinitesimal self, the deciding factor, the volition that we have, the willpower, we invite our soul. And of course this is not just a sheer willpower of great intensity to do this, although could do it like that, but I imagine that would end up doing more harm than good, because there is a process that has to be that doesn't have to be respected, but that should be respected, because the field of awareness that one has between one's own volition and one's own soul, so between the infinitesimally small and the infinitesimally large, the field of awareness determines the amount of power that you can pull, the amount of willpower that one's can pull at any moment given in time. And so if the spirit is stuck inside the body, so to speak, not that there's anything negative about it, but if the volition, if the field of one's own spirit, or the relation between the spirit and the soul is not in favor of the soul, then putting too much energy might cause some undesirable consequences. Now, generally speaking, there isn't any reason to be concerned as long as it is done with grace and with harmony, so respecting the process. And as time goes by, the intensity can be increased. Of course, this is my experience with this is not a complete novice with this, but it's I've done the high intensity, and I'm just mentioning this because I don't want to sound like it's completely speculative. I've done the high intensity. I've done it for an intense period of time. And I went for the route or the path of intensity, and it shut me down. Like came a point where the consequences were just not worth the path itself. And so once I've gathered myself back together, which took I must say a couple of months, a process of respect, and once, of course, it compounds on itself, right? So as you get, as the field of one's awareness and the intelligence of what is actually happening begins to be understood, then of course the intensity can be increased, but at first, then it one can even go with the minimalist route, where more like a meditative or contemplative even approach, opposed to going for a measured approach of how much effort do I put into it. But a meditative one is where you put the minimal amount of effort in order to have the maximum amount of ease and harmony and flow, right? So in meditation, you're not sweating. You're not supposed to be sweating. You're supposed to be calming down in order to let things find its own harmony, and you do that by simply focusing. Like a referee doesn't have to blow his whistle very loudly, or shouldn't have to blow it loudly in order to be respected, because the consequences are known if you don't respect the referee. So too with the volition. If the very soft volition or the minimalist volitional approach is not respected, then their frustration begins to be built, and so the body begins to understand that the volition is boss, right? So in meditation, it's like, no, I stay still, I remain, and no, I stand still, I remain, and so on and so forth, until the body just gives into this very slow minimalist approach, but that inevitably wins because it is there to stay, right, in the meditative posture. So too with the invocation, the ritual of essence, where we're pulling when we're invoking one's own greater self, so letting the experience come to you, but by inviting it. And so there is a certain degree of creativity that could benefit this kind of ritual, in a sense where you could utter words out loud in order to improve the invocation, in order to induce it, in order to slightly intensify the invocation from various angles, in order to discover what exactly your soul entails for you. Right? So for some people, those qualities might be more geared towards a sense of power, and for some other people it might be more sense of harmony. And of course, at first it will be very much relative to the reactions of the body, right? So if one feels, generally speaking, stressed, then of course then the question of the qualities of grace and harmony will speak to you more than those of power, unless of course the stress comes from a sense of helplessness, then power will be very attractive. But as time goes by, the reactions or the qualities that will attract you more will not be of the body, because then with time and with proper consistency, it will be more about the imagination that will be attractive, and about the experiences that you've had since you've started. So in general, so the experiences that you started, because one of the purposes of this ritual of the essence is to of the self is to open up the path of the soul, so that you can experience the the phenomenons and the elements of the soul that make up your experience, so that you can actually open up your field of experience and experience the world as something actually magical. So as the consistency of this ritual is done, should be done on a daily basis. Doesn't have to be, but the more often it is done, although not all day. You don't want to do the all day route unless you want to become a monk or something. But the consistency will yield results, and those results will yield changes, and then the qualities that will be attractive to you will be more based on the changes than the former, which will just be the self as the body, right? Because we identify extremely deeply, well, maybe some people less, but with the body. But as time goes by, we do this this discovery. I don't want to say work, because essentially it doesn't have to be work, although some parts of it end up being like work for most people. We end up discovering the the soulful nature, the spiritual nature, and the magical nature of being in the world, being in this larger being, in this infinite space that we're sharing with each other, in this what also we could call a material world, and our influence on it and the way we can interact with each other and with the physical world. So this process is thus the invocation of the self in order to open up the self, and to open up the doors, the windows, and in order to invite the spiritual experiences that can come as anything as simple as a synchronicity in everyday life, or they can come as dreams, or outer body experiences, or anything really. There's no limit as to how this can be experienced. So yeah, just wanted to share that.